Welcome back. You're watching Morning Prime. It's exactly 8:08 a.m. from wherever you're watching us from. I hope you've had a fantastic morning. We're here to bring you up to speed with what has been encompassed in the local dailies, just evaluating some of the top headlines, what stands out in terms of governance, economy, and policy issues. I'm joined by Maliba Arnold, Moses Obenzo, and Professor Gitile Naituli. Gentlemen, thank you for your time. It's the final hour of the show, and I'd like us to begin with the headline on the front page of the Standard, all to do with the blackouts that we've experienced in the country and the steps that are taken by the government to reel in on the issue. Now, this is the headline: Ruto cracks the whip, and we have some of the measures that have been illustrated right there, the measures that were recommended during the cabinet meeting that was held just yesterday. Number one, split the transmission line system so that power failure in one part does not affect the entire country, and equally to deal with overloading, they're set to build a 37.5 billion shilling Bomet Narok line with the African Development Bank funding. Now, it goes without saying that the egg was on our face as a country due to the constant blackouts, especially at critical infrastructure in the country. Talk about the busy airport terminus in the country, talk about the hospitals that were affected and other public buildings as well. So let's just listen in to what the Cabinet Secretary for Energy, Davis Chirchir, had to say when they were put to task to explain what exactly happened on the 10th of December 2023. Listen.
When it happened, I was flying in from Dubai, and I experienced firsthand the anger because I was at the airport when the belt stopped, and therefore we could not get our luggages. The generator did not take off immediately. And it's a challenge that, as a country, we are really ashamed of, and we need to address it. We've continued to connect customers on the last mile. We've continued to build industry, and we've not built a network in the last 5, 6, 7 years. And there is so much constraint in the transmission of electrons from wherever they are generated. And sometimes the network drips when it is overloaded. Yesterday was caused by an overload between Kisumu, Moroni, when there was sudden demand, and the line that between Kisumu and Moroni is dimensioned to carry 80 megawatts. When the line went down, it was carrying 120 megawatts, and suddenly there was a demand of an additional 20 megawatts on that line. For a line to be carrying 149 megawatts when it is designed for 80, it felt threatened, and it dripped and cascaded down to the rest of the country.
All right, so that is the Energy Cabinet Secretary, Davis Chirchir, just giving an explanation as to what exactly happened as per the Energy Ministry. So those are the facts we're dealing with right now. And just if we could have that paper projected on the screen, we'll get to see what the president had to say in terms of the embarrassment we're dealing with as a country. This is what the president had to say. I would like to inform you today, if we could have it on our screens right now, I would like to inform you today that the embarrassing power blackouts that have been experienced across the entire country severally since the year began are not going to be acceptable going forward. They've never been acceptable. Let's start from there. So, Maliba, your reaction to this? There's some who are calling for heads to roll, that one time is too many. How about 3 times in 3 months? Should this perhaps have ended with the sacking of some key men in the energy sector? Or perhaps, even as we take a look at some of the measures, what do you make of the measures that were recommended?
First of all, I don't think that our grid problems are an output of just heads. So I still disagree with the decision, of course, by the CSNT, the transport CS at some point going to Kenya Airports Authority at that particular time and sending people home. Because if you are a consumer of government data and information, this problem has been around for quite a while. I am actually lucky because my classmate heads the grid part of it at Ketrako. And I remember every time these issues come, especially for those of us who come here to talk, we make calls and talk to people who are in some sectors.
Yeah.
So speaking to him, he doesn't even live far from this particular place. I remember that conversation sometimes in the first national outage we had, and he told me there has been a request from KETRACO for the last 3 years to undo our grid because our grid is dilapidated. One, it's unitary. And remember that the power system is unbundled in a way that generation has got the power generation, you're dealing with KenGen and the IPPs, and then transmission, you're dealing with KETRACO. Then when it comes to distributorship, you're dealing with Kenya Power. You know, the way we are used, we only know one person. We know Kenya Power. So Kenya Power is like the owner of a canteen. The person who is supposed to deliver milk in the morning is supposed to deliver the milk in a canter. He shows up with a tuk-tuk. So he has to do a lot of small trips so that then you have that. And then the clients are waiting. So the clients do not know the supplier. They don't care about the supplier who is the KETRACO doing transmission. Yeah. Sometimes a lot of the problems are actually coming from generation because before you balance the grid, you have to have different generators in different places, all of them balanced to a certain level before the grid is balanced. But our grid has been so bad. Today, KETRACO owns all the transmission infrastructure except in Nairobi, where a little bit of the transmission is owned by KPLC. We need to rethink that unbundling. We need to give strength, because at the end of the day, all of us bash KETRACO, even when the problem is for an IPP. As in, all of us bash Kenya Power, even if it's an IPP that has done that. All of us will deal with Kenya Power, even if it's KETRACO that is a transmission problem. Okay. It's a little bit complex, and I think this boldness, this is not the first time the proposal of unbundling our grid has gone to the cabinet. It will always go there, and they will say we do not have available money. It's true. There is no money anytime to actually look into some of these things. And 66 billion shillings is a lot. But then that has actually been threatening infrastructure, core infrastructure, for example, at the airport. Production. There are some companies, there are some factories where if a production line stops, restarting it and optimizing it will take a lot of time, and you have lost a lot. So I think this is something that we really need to work around. We need to not just work around stabilizing. If you go to Western Kenya, for example, it's one of those areas, and I'm happy that the CS was not ashamed to speak of that. If you were to go to Kakamega, Bungoma, Busia, those guys sometimes stay for a whole week without power. It's only that it's outside of Nairobi, so people don't talk about it. That is a very troubled region. We're hoping that if Mumias Sugar comes back to power, it might go back to doing its 35 megawatts it used to do, and besides using it, also stabilize the grid on that particular end. So the decision is right. These heads rolling when you have invested into the whole project hasn't worked. Like, for example, we had generators. And I want us to actually separate the issue at KAA, at JKIA, yeah, and the Kenya power issues, or rather the power issues, should not be looked at as one. Because I have worked in Somalia, I still work in Somalia today. And I'll tell you, those people do not have a functional grid. But I have been to those airports, from Puntland on the other side, Somaliland, up to Mogadishu. There is no single day I have been at the airport and there is no power. Yet they don't have a grid. So the problem at JKIA should be called for what it is. It is incompetence. Because what stops them having a simple standby functional gensets that they have 4 of them, and 2 of them didn't work. What stopped them from working? So those are 2 different things. They should be dealt with separately, because JKIA is a critical infrastructure. You cannot afford the jokes that they're playing around there.
Quite so. Obenzo, as you come in, and we heard from the Transport Cabinet Secretary earlier on saying such an instance will not happen again, giving Kenyans his assurance. Right now, we saw him asking for investigations into perhaps claims of sabotage, because he couldn't understand how the generators are there, they didn't pick up, and we're left with an egg on our face. What's your evaluation of the steps taken so far to rid us of this particular mess?
Number one, the CS is correct saying it's shamelessness. So he's correct. And the moment there's a shame somewhere, it means someone is either ignorant or doing sabotage. Then I also concur with my brother here, saying there's 2 problems to it. One, poor infrastructure in the energy sector, and second, it's incompetence in JKA. For example, just having a simple standby generator Honestly, that one, it's unacceptable and is a sabotage to a country like Kenya. Now, electricity in this country, it's acting under a command economic system where the government has the command of prices, of the distribution, and how well it can reach to the common mwananchi. And one disadvantage of a command economic system is that there's less competition. And the moment you don't compete with anybody for anything, you can even decide, why should I put this standby generator here? I mean, let me just relax and have a holiday, you see? Yeah. But I think that is the way we should be thinking. The solution is, let's have competition. Let's have another company which can compete favorably, so that at least the company that is not either willing or not serious at all, it will definitely be wiped out. Okay. But in the meantime, the issues to deal with heads rolling and sacking people, I think that's just PR. Because in all honesty, why should you sack just a mere officer, a manager? Yet, infrastructure has to be taught at the cabinet, the CS for energy. It starts from there. The president talks about 37 billion to connect the line from Bomet to Naro. Who would you expect to do that? Is it a junior officer? And when are we? Another thing, where were they to think about? Why should you wait until something has failed? Now it's the third time happening. He's doing the same thing of over-promising and under-delivering. We have been there.
But at least there's an assurance that money is coming from AFDB, yeah? Yeah. So let's wait for the processes to start, because it definitely has to take some time. I was listening to the PS, and he mentioned that perhaps by March next year, that's when they will start the whole process, even as compensation is looked at and whatnot in terms of where the lines will be put. Prof, as you come in, where does the buck stop? Because we've heard of this narrative that in developed countries, you know, if something would happen in such a scale, that perhaps someone would be going home. They don't seem to agree that perhaps it's PR in terms of heads being rolled, but should that be is it the basic minimum? If
you know where I come from, we have a saying, is a bad rain comes with the wind. And that explains why the rain is bad. This is not a question of money. This is a question of poor management, period. And therefore, if you want to deal with it, you should start with the minister. If you want hands to roll, where you start is the minister. You see, I was shocked the other day. I think the first time there was the longest blackout ever. The transport minister went and fired some guy at the airport. Meaning, it's the same as coming to your house and firing you, because that fellow is just a consumer of electricity. So what the wazir is trying to tell us here is very hard for anybody who, you know, we are very lazy thinkers. We need to accept that to understand what he is saying. There's a book, physics book we went through in Form 2. It's called Abbott. It's a very small book. In that book, we were told about using gadgets in electricity generation, which either lowers or puts the power up. So you want to tell us all the years we have run the electricity, we didn't have step down or step up transformers. This is not the first government to run electricity here. Uhuru Kenyatta was here. I don't believe we experienced what we are doing. Under Kibaki, it was completely an handoff. Okay? So let me tell you what is happening here. This is poor management, not just in the powers. I think it's everywhere right now. It's not just in the power. Because, you know, there is something we call an attempt to rearrange furniture when the house is already on fire. So this house seems to be burning in all directions, not in just electricity. Somebody, I read in the social media, in the second blackout, somebody just wrote, these Kenyans are quite brilliant these days. Somebody says, I can assure you this will resort to a tender. Okay? Government money is stolen through projects. There is no other way you steal government money unless you are brave enough to budget it the way the control on budget was telling us. So this was just a process of creating tenders. And now the tenders have been created.
So let me get you. You're questioning why blackouts didn't happen as
didn't
frequently
happen
in the previous administration.
Yes, why?
So from your point, creating a crisis to create a solution.
Create a solution. You create a problem and then you create a solution for the problem.
Yes, sir.
And and I tell you, these Kenyans are brilliant, because after the second blackout, I read somebody wrote in the Twitter. He said, I want to assure you the blackout eventually will end to tenders. And sure enough, one solution is some tender here. And not a small one, is that 7 billion. Probably the money that they could have put the medicine to some dispensaries. Because we can't just generate power issue, which we didn't have in the previous 2 administrations.
Okay.
So...
But the consumers are increasing as well. There's so many dynamics to this.
Now you tell me the consumers have increased in 1 year more than the increase in the last 10 years? Okay. If there is an increase, it's gradual.
Fair enough. Yes, Maliba, briefly, as we shift focus,
You know, Prof loves actually engaging in a lot of intellectual dishonesty. He's splitting money and management. In Management 101, management has got 8 pillars. If you're looking at management science, the bigger one, and then if you go down, you can reduce control and bring it to 7 if you're doing the old management part of it. But to understand management, there are only 2 words: effective and efficient. Once you are able to define these 2 words in management at the definitions level, the efficient and effectiveness, you actually are done with everything else. When it comes to effective, it's about using of resources. So you are not going to split money from management. When it comes to efficient, as short time as possible. I'm trying to actually truncate it as much as possible. So it's not true that this is not a management issue, and you therefore can not split and put resources aside. 2, if we were to engage in honest discussion, you would know that this is not the first time this particular proposal has been, and by the way, that has been a national security, I'm talking about a National Security Council proposal, that our grid is so weak. What do you need? You just need a B-52 from Mombasa up to Kisumu, dropping 1 bomb as you go, and the whole country is down. You don't need more than 5 bombs to actually bring down the national grid. They have spoken, and this is available data. It's not like stories we are creating from the air. Yes. That's why I started by saying, if you are a consumer of national policy documents, you would actually realize that this is a recurring problem. Okay. He then goes ahead and says that there were no blackouts under Kibaki. He probably came to this country the other day. I don't know. He probably just landed from the moon. We saw under Kibaki, that is why we went into rural electrification and we went on overcharge. Under Kibaki, under Kenyatta, we also went out, and we have seen, as in, I have been in this country for most of my growth. I've just gone to work outside recently, and I know that those things have been with us for a while. So even as we go out, the cabinet cannot all of a sudden, in one night, get money from AFDB. You know the process of how you get that money and how you get that particular financing. It's been a process. And 2, even technical questioning of the process, just technically question this. Is it fair to have a unitary grid where it's balanced on one thing, that if anything happens, a monkey in Kiambere goes swings, and when the monkey was swinging on the grid, it wasn't during Ruto's, just reminding you of a prominent one. When the monkeys were swinging on the grid, it wasn't under Kenya Kwanza's administration. So a monkey in Kiambere swinging on the grid trips the whole country. We had this discussion then. We are back to it. We need to move away from having national dialogue just as a talking shop to then action. And that's where the president is going. And what do? We move very fast and characterize him in this particular manner. At least, I know, at least for those who have got the benefit of us to come and sit here, when we come, let us go beyond what happens on social media, which is actually is quite big but very thin. You can actually be very popular on social media, but you're just popular around yourself. All right. You can actually think you've got so much information, but you probably are running. Like yesterday, I was asking a PhD holder in my group that I work with, a whole supervisor sharing what Suluhu Hassan has said. When, if you just run a little bit of search on Twitter, you realize that that was created and choreographed by Kenyans. Here is a 3-degree holder. who can't even, and we're talking about access of information. So a little bit of a balance in these discussions is important. That is all I would actually ask for them that come to this morning and August platforms to talk to Kenyans.
Okay.
We just for your information, the line from Jinja is still there and is separate from the line from here, from Gambere. They are not they are not in the same grid.
The grid.
So you can have
the
power,
grid is one.
You can have power outage in Nakuru when you don't have power outage in Nairobi.
It depends
nationwide power outage.
It depends at the. You see, we are already having blackouts around us.
Well, you didn't have to say that anyway. Anyway, Maliva, well noted. Definitely various dissecting views, but the point of focus is we definitely need to sort out the power outages that are happening in the country. The president has made a couple of recommendations through the cabinet, and we wait and see when this will be implemented as we wait for that Bomet-Narok line to be built under that ADBF banking funding. So I now want to shift focus to yet another issue that the president mentioned just yesterday, and I'd like us to be brief on this, even though it's quite a weighty conversation due to interest of time. The president yesterday mentioned that the housing plan will continue, and he made a case for that particular approach, saying it will be implemented despite the dissenting voices. Remember, this housing program was put on ice, I think it's over a fortnight ago, by the courts ruling it as discriminatory, but equally gave a period of, I think, 45 days to dot the I's, cross the T's, and make sure that it is backed by law and whatnot. Let's listen in to what the president had to say on the housing program.
The country will be a bustling construction site. And much more importantly, as you all know, the amount of land fragmentation that is going on in Kenya is alarming. We have whole counties like Vihiga and Kisii that if we don't do something about it, so shortly they will become rural slums. We need to reverse land fragmentation, and housing is the tool we have to reverse fragmentation and to give us an opportunity to save the land that we have for production of food and production of other items, so that we can drive our food security initiatives, but also provide settlements and housing for our people. And finally, we will stimulate the whole ecosystem of manufacturing of construction products. Recently, I was giving a check of 140 million shillings to, you know, those fellows on Ngong Road. You know those fellows there making furniture there on Ngong Road. Those fellows nowadays are entrepreneurs. You know, wale watu mnaona tu ni watu jokali. Siku hizi wako noma sana. You know, they are doing for us doors, they are doing for us windows. They are now a company for a housing plan. So this beautiful project was in the manifesto of Kenya Kwanza. The same housing project, complete with percentages of the levy, was also in the Azimio manifesto. But when it came to implementation, my friends, that is where the devil lives. Nobody wanted it implemented. Because we all want to talk about it. It is good. You know, we go tell the people we are going to do this, we are going to do this. When hardly people mean it. I am telling you, this time round, I am implementing it. And I am so determined, because we must do it. Korea did it, Singapore did it, Malaysia did it, and that is why they are ahead of us. We know what we must do, but we cannot gather the courage to do it. But this time round, whatever it takes, we are going to implement it. We will also give you guys a chance. You don't have now to harass yourself, or you are looking for cement, I don't know, you are looking for steel, I don't know, you are looking for stones to go and build a house. Just log into Boma Yangu. I think it is 832 was Boma Yangu. Hinga will come and brief you, my PS for housing. You will choose for yourself the house you want. It is the responsibility of the government of Kenya to deliver that house to you. Kazi yako ni kulipa tu whatever it is that you need.
So a couple of takeaways from that excerpt of President William Ruto's speech during a diaspora conference yesterday. Number one, land fragmentation is an issue and will reverse it through housing. Number two, housing project was on both manifestos, including the levies. So the devil is in the implementation. He's biting and making the difficult decisions, according to him. And it's the responsibility of the government of Kenya, according to the president, to deliver that house to you. So a couple of takeaways. And gentlemen, let's be brief, even as we await the other speech by the president on privatization. What do you make of the housing project so far? Is it poison chalice? Is this the much needed reprieve we need to sort out the housing issue we have in the country? Prof, you're smiling. What's up?
You call it poison chalice. I think I will tell you what I would do if I was the president. I would remove all the taxes on housing materials. Okay? It's maybe difficult to control land prices because land is owned individually or by counties. But at least the government has control on taxes on material for building. Then I will let the Kenyans build houses.
By themselves?
By themselves. That is the most efficient way of delivering housing. If he didn't, there is a deficit because he says there was also a similar thing. So I think he may be right because I'm not aware of that.
That's true.
That's what I would do. But the Kenyan government delivering a successful project, since independent, there has never been a successful project delivered by the government because of corruption.
Not even one.
Which one? You can tell me you live in Kenya. You can give me one. Because of corruption. I mean, if we cannot run it successfully, Kenya pipeline. Okay? If we can't run it successfully, KICC, we must sell it. If we can't run it successfully, Kenya Sindri. How will you run the housing? What will you? So the corruption prevents us. And therefore, anything that the government, the government undertaken several projects here. Maybe you ask a good question. Maybe there's actually a successful one, Mwea irrigation scheme. But that succeeded because of the people there, because there were a lot of schemes. The same established the rest of the country. Aero, there was all the others. So Mwea success can only be attributed to the people who live in that area.
Right.
So what I'm saying here is this housing story is an interesting one. Good thing is the court eventually may save the country. Because this is a slush fund. In my opinion, the housing levy is just a slush fund. And I'm saying it's a slush fund because where even is the government having the land where it's going to build the houses? First of all, if what I'm reading is correct, then we are making land grab official. See, a county cannot point a piece of land to the president and tell him, put housing here. Then the president goes and finds a contractor who now has to come and build those houses, either rent them or sell. What has happened is that the land has been grabbed and given to somebody for free. So I'm saying that there is something yelaweki, okay? Where is the government in buying the land in which now the construction will take place? Because what I would think you will be doing is something that Tanzanians have successfully done. The national housing scheme in Tanzania is a complete success. It's a parastatal, ran very well. We have national housing ourselves also. So we couldn't have put money into the national housing and allow the national housing to build houses for us.
Okay.
So I just would like you to one day make a trip to Ngong, to Rongai. There are some houses there. Okay, I don't know whether they are government or they were individually built, but there was only for 3 million. That houses in a year they will probably be selling for 1 million or 500,000. They are the poorest houses I've ever seen. Built. And that's why I'm telling you, government of Kenya, the best thing it can do for us is avoid doing things that the public can do. Make an environment better for Kenyan entrepreneurs to deliver.
Obenzo, your take on the housing project, briefly.
House is a basic need, like food and clothes. I totally agree. And the project of having house in this country, it is perfect. But the issues is priorities. Today, you are saying there's no money to pay loan. Tomorrow, now you are saying, now there's money, you know, we need to build houses, we need billions to build houses. It's a total mixture.
But we're being taxed.
Yes, we will be taxed, but we are taxed here to build a house. You're a teacher in the village, a primary school teacher. Then, on the other hand, you know, there is also heavy taxation to pay the debt. So clearly, for this at this point, at this juncture, no, maybe 5 years to come. Another thing, he's talking about that project. You know, it was even in the Azimio manifesto. You see, two wrong don't make a right. Even if there's or Raila could be the president today, we could have still come here and say, no. It's no way, Baba, wait a minute. Another thing, the court has already issued an order of City that the implementation, it's discriminatory. It's unconstitutional and because it's discriminatory.
Yeah.
So, if the president just stamp and implement, he'll be acting against the law ultra vires. We have doctrine of separation, 3 arms of the government. We have the executive, the parliament, and the judiciary. Judiciary is there as overseer. If the executive is acting ultra vires, definitely it will have to come up and say, listen, this is unprocedural, and hence you need to stop. Probably the best advice I can give to the president and even the people around him, can he go back to the book and say, okay, fine, the judiciary is saying it's discriminatory. How else can we maneuver around this point?
Haven't they done that? We've seen a bill introduced on the floor of the House, perhaps given, you know, minding the P's and Q's in terms of what the court said in terms of discrimination. So they're trying to take that period of 45 days that was given to right their wrongs. Is that the right move?
Yes, it's the right move, but now why just stamp about it? But let the judiciary.
But what will that do when something is unconstitutional? Is unconstitutional even if Parliament passes?
Yes.
You see, any law passed by Parliament must agree with the Constitution. Even doesn't, it is null and void to the extent of the inconsistency. So what they are doing in Parliament, I don't know. What I know, the court did wrong though. Having declared the process illegal, then the court cannot extend an illegality. Having declared it unconstitutional, it should have stopped there because an illegality remains an illegality.
And Kenyans should get back their money.
Well, I don't know how you return it. That's my point. How you return to the Kenyans.
Anyway, Maliba, briefly.
Yes. In response to this question, or rather the current topic we're handling, can walk us back to so many questions we were asking each other. And the one thing, I've looked at social cycles, economic cycles, and also gone back to history. And I know that a person in my age, if the government of the day does not deliver, I'll be here doing poetry and serious prose in the next 10 years. Youthful poverty is likely to actually extend to lifetime poverty. That is why for me, one of those things that actually inspires me to point out what can work and what should work is actually better than actually having platitudes of who want to a certain sector. Be that as it is, you remember the first questions I asked, and they caused a little bit of issues here. Remember when I asked, we were talking about economic growth and development, and I asked, where do you get money? With the having in mind the background, where do you get the money, and how do you put it in people's pockets? Now, that is an example. That housing program scheme is an example. They can actually point to so many other places. And we spoke so well here about our shrinking arable land. I gave you an example of Malawi, where 80% live in urban areas, and most of their land being fertile. That is why they actually have got so much food. So, as the president then points out, things like Kisii and Vihiga, where they actually are turning into rural slums. You can actually go to, there's a constituency called Tongaren. There's a place there where this is actually Kenya's biggest rural slum. Okay. They're not good places to be. I was part and parcel of the new plan, the Nairobi Integrated Urban Master Plan, when we were doing it in 2016, 2014. And one of those things we actually discovered is that we were having urban sprawl. The city is not stopping to grow. We are eating into land, and land use is a key issue when you're talking about planning, if you're talking about development. So, the solution to our housing largely is in the sky. So that then you do not have red, good soil in Kiambu going down. We're talking about export. We've been doing good in coffee. Somebody pointed out here how we are not doing good coffee. But that land is falling to a rising concrete jungle. Yes. So here, the housing scheme is an attempt, number one, to put money in the pocket. How you put in money. You remember that story about the US after the Second World War, having so many retired soldiers and you don't have jobs to give them. So you give one to chimba shimo, the other one puts in a tree, and the other one covers it up. So intensity or more jobs, so that then people are useful, and then there is money. That's how we put it into circulation. Okay. It goes to that. But then what did I get? I got a lot of gerongonomics. At least I was starting school. I was going to nursery, I think, when the Girongo printing of money was there. As in that thinking that you can just print money from anywhere. We are still paying for gerongonomics, and I saw a lot of that coming in here. Okay. So the financing bit is normally a little bit difficult. So when you talk about implementation, the president has got the Bill of Rights like any other person. Uhuru Kenyatta had a housing program. Kibaki tried, actually started from Vision 2030. A lot of the programs we have now were already thought through Vision 2030. Even in Azimio Manifesto, there is that particular process. The only difference is actually 0.5 on the taxes, the levy they actually had proposed. Yes. So what does it mean? It doesn't mean that anyone is dishonest. It only means that both of us see the need. It is in the implementation that there is actually a problem. Okay. But I need to find on that, I need to find knowledge by telling you this. You know, government does not belong to anyone. Opposition belongs to everybody. You know, even you, Jesse, tomorrow you can wake up in the morning and decide to be the opposition. But Uhuru was in government last year, he's not in government now. He can choose to go in the opposition or not. Those of us here who might actually feel like we're in opposition might be in government tomorrow. So when you address these issues a lot of times, normally to give it a little bit of a gist that helps the people who are listening to us, you try favor them with information that is inspiring and probably informs their choices. Okay. That's what I'm thinking. There is the court part of it. All right. For the court part of it, I think that is how a democracy works. We are having a dialogue as a nation that when you think that you can actually, you have got a good idea, but you do not have a monopoly of ideas. So if we cannot challenge you on the floor of parliament, we take you to court. And if you can go to court, because so far, as far as I know, the housing project and the challenge of the housing levy, Hinga and his people have not exhausted the appeal mechanism that are available. Number two, they have not also exhausted other alternatives. If CDF is unconstitutional, and we still have it being administered, you can't say that the window in parliament is completely closed on how you can actually save the housing levy. It will be fixed. Yeah, but two wrongs don't make a right. Well, I'm not necessarily saying that the housing levy and CDF are one and the same. They're not. Okay, well noted. Let's listen to what the president had to say briefly on the matter to do with privatization of the state-owned corporations. Of course, it's caused a lot of public reaction in terms of selling some of these national treasures, as they've called it. KICC, you name it, Kenya Seed Company, Moe Rice Mills, a couple of state, 11 of them, Parastatals, that are lined up for privatization. This is what the president had to say.
We are also going to save public money. We are spending billions of shillings sustaining companies. We have 350 public companies, public entities, yeah, that just take money from the budget. We're supporting them. Billions of shillings. Some of them you ask, what is this one doing? Nobody can tell you what the hell it is doing. But we are putting in 100 million, 200 million, 500 million every year. So some of those things, we are going to make a decision. And by the way, very interesting. A report was already done. A whole report saying these companies, about 150, should be removed. What they are doing can be done by the private sector. In fact, sell some of these companies to the private sector. The private sector will give us more value out of them. Yeah? Some of them divest. But the report has been here now 10 years. Because it's a very difficult decision to make. But I will make the decision. I promise you. I will make the decision and take the consequences. Because Kenya must move. Yes, if we know what the right thing is. My friends, you can never go wrong by doing the right thing. How can you go wrong by doing the right thing?
Okay, interesting. So that's the president making his case in terms of the approach to privatize state corporations and sell those non-performing state entities. Maliba, briefly, like he's mentioned and he's made the case that we are spending money sustaining these 350 public entities. But there are those who raise the concern. And I saw a couple of, sorry to bring social media in, I know you're quite critical about it, but I saw some comparing KICC and selling perhaps state buildings, iconic buildings. Is it I'm forgetting the names, is it Times Square? I'm not sure, but some of those iconic buildings. Where do you see it on the fence? Is it a proper Eiffel Tower and the likes? Yes. Is it a necessary pain we need?
Or the Statue of Liberty in New York.
Exactly. Is this a necessary pain? Briefly.
Or a Washington Monument.
There you go.
First of all, I remember the Abdikadir report in 2013-2014, commissioned by President Kenyatta to review how we run our parastatals. You know, parastatals are special programs. Some of them, I agree, should be directorates. Like, for example, something that should be a parastatal now and we've never made it a parastatal is the meteorological department. Let's remain the department throughout. You know that if you, for example, made it properly a parastatal, it would make much more money. Okay. But one of the reasons why we cannot make it go the parastatal way is because even the army depends on what they actually do. So there is some national strategic interests that inform why the Kenya Met remains up to date. A department when all of us know that you can unbundle resources and make it work much better if it were quote-unquote a parastatal. But some parastatals, in my opinion, are non-core. They should be directorates. They should be departments down there in government. So they get money as a special purpose vehicle, which gets money by the as priority. When you are giving out money after you have paid the sovereign debt, you give money to parastatals, and even government pays itself. GOK, the core of GOK pays itself last. After parastatals have gotten their money. So in the Abdikadir report, there were some non-core sectors where we were in and we were moribund. And they said, why would we not allow the private sector to come in? And I heard Professor blowing hot and cold. Initially, in the previous contribution, he said, if government is making losses, why are they stuck in that sector? They should allow the people, that's the private sector, to actually come in and do better, because in some instances they've actually done better where government has failed. So there, of course, there are problems in management around that. Then we agreed that to solve the problem of management of parastatals, let us do away with the State Corporations Act as it is and come up with a new law around that, and we called it the Government-Owned Enterprises, the GOE Bill. The GOE Bill is in Parliament 10 years since then, from 2013-2014 up to now, it has never moved. It's the same way with the Public Benefits Authorities that was to replace the NGOs Coordination Act, has not been worked around. So there are populist, any populist leader or populist policies rarely bring impactful change in society. When Kibaki came in, you remember people saying that the country will refuse. Kibaki was so unpopular in 2005, 2004, partly because of the MOU, but largely because they were breaking houses down everywhere. And I remember a house in Karen that went down, and the media reported it was 120 million then.
Okay.
I was just coming out of my teenage.
All right.
It was so serious. So what I'm
Yes.
saying is this. Today, if you look at Nairobi, don't we enjoy those bypasses? Hasn't Nairobi changed so much? Raila himself knows the need of radical change. That's what I'm saying. Some of the things the president says today don't really, are not populist. They are not good to the eye and the ear.
Yes.
But if you looked at Nairobi today and you look at Nairobi of 2002, you will see what radical and hard decisions can be. The radical decision taken by Kibaki, and he took Raila and Kamau, tractor ngumu kabisa, and gave them those particular departments. And he looked aside. Today you see the difference. All of us praise Kibaki for infrastructure, but do you know how we reclaimed the bypasses? Yet they were in the Nairobi master plan of 1973.
Interesting. So, Obenzo, briefly, your take on the privatization issue. How should we approach it?
Yeah, my point is this. There's some private corporate entities, some of them, they are beyond their existence, or I can say, so we need to analyze them and see. Some of these, like a tree that sheds the leaves. Okay. If they become redundant, yes, you can do away with them. Okay. Because why the need of consuming? They're not providing revenue to the government. So, and some are very key. The key one should remain. But again, you see now the public is seeing some mischief in this thing, because when you
we are a suspicious country.
You're a suspicious country, You see, when you talk about sending of the KICC, probably a scandal might come out of it. So let the saving of privatization be honest and follow the procedures
as it should. And Prof, as you come in, those who are questioning, money has KICC right there.
I don't support that, by the way. For me, KICC, I paid money to come from Mumias to come and take a photo there.
So you don't
sell others.
Okay, Prof, finally and briefly, yes.
The question is, the president saying that he's giving money to the Parastatals and that needs to stop. I agree with him. Why is he giving the money? First, he needs to answer that question before the sale. Because when you look at it, some of the listed Parastatals, it's a question of management. KCC can generate money for itself. Why then is money budgeted, for example? Kenya Pipeline can generate money for itself. And so it's Kenya Seed. Now, I've just isolated those three because I want to agree with one senator, Okia Mutata, who said some decisions being made by this government, they imbonda on treason. You can't have any individual controlling Kenya Seed or any organization controlling Kenya Seed because that can contaminate the national seed basket overnight. All right, Professor. You can't have an individual controlling the Kenya pipeline. So, privatize, yes. But then be specific which one you are privatizing and why.
So it's not a blanket move as such. We need to be quite critical about the process. As Maliba said, KICC, it's
sentimental.
It's sentimental. The sentimental value to it.
That sentimental value cannot.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. We definitely covered a lot of issues, and we appreciate your input right here. Maliba Arnold, always a pleasure to have you with us, public policy analyst, joined by Moses Obenzo, economist. Asante sana for your time. You're the man putting the clashing heads a little bit adrift, but it's all to do with the betterment of the country. Professor Gitile Naituli, always a pleasure, and thank you for extending your time with us as well. That's the end of today's edition of Morning Prime. My name is Jesse Rogers. Enjoy the rest of your viewing.